Hey there. You're here. That's all you need to be. Tonight, let's rest. Close your eyes and let this story rock you gently like an old hammock on a summer night. It's called Grandfather's Hammock. But it's not just about the hammock. It's about the things he told me when the world was quiet and the stars were listening. He used to say, "Some stories only come when your feet leave the ground." And I always believed him, until one night I started to wonder if they were more than just stories. If you enjoy soft tales like this, gentle, slow, filled with a little magic and memory, you're always welcome here. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe so you won't miss the next quiet night with us. My grandfather's house sat quietly at the end of a dirt path, tucked between tamarind trees and walls that smelled of old rain. Everything in that house was slow. The floor creaked like it was whispering secrets. The clock ticked like it didn't care about time. And the wind never rushed through. It wandered in and stayed a while. In the middle of that quiet world was his hammock. It stretched between two wooden beams, its threads worn smooth by the years, faded in color, but strong. The kind of strong that doesn't shout. When I was little, I thought it could fly. I'd crawl in, and just like that, the ground would fall away, and I was floating between ceiling and floor, between real and not quite real. That was when he'd begin, his voice soft, almost like he wasn't talking to me, but to the air around us. He never said, "Once upon a time." He just started. And every time, it felt like the story had already been waiting there, swinging with us in the hammock, just waiting for the quiet to arrive. One night, he began. A girl wandered into a forest where no birds sang and no footsteps made a sound. His voice didn't rise, didn't rush. It drifted, like fog over still water. I didn't ask where this forest was, or who the girl was. I just listened, because that's what the hammock asked of you, to listen, without needing to understand. In the story, the girl carried a bell that wouldn't ring until she whispered her name into it. And when she did, the trees leaned closer, as if they'd been waiting for her. I remember holding my breath as he spoke, half expecting the wind outside to hush, so it could hear better too. When the story ended, he didn't explain it. He just smiled and said, "Some places are only real when you close your eyes." I didn't know what he meant. Not really. But something about it made my chest feel full and quiet at the same time. That wasn't the only story, not by far. Some nights, he spoke of a boy who found a golden fish trapped in a puddle that only appeared when it rained at midnight. Other times, he told of a hill that moved just a little every time someone laughed near it. And then there was the girl with a voice so soft it could calm storms, but only if no one was watching. He never said where these stories came from, never called them dreams, never claimed they were true, but the way he told them, you'd think he'd been there. His eyes would lose focus, like he was looking through the walls, through time itself, as if the story wasn't made up, but remembered. I never interrupted, even when I wanted to ask, did that really happen? Because deep down, somewhere between the sway of the hammock and the hush of the room, I didn't want the answer. I just wanted the magic to keep going. One evening, after a story about a village where dreams could be traded for stars, he stopped, just for a moment. He looked at me, not the way a grandfather looks at a child, but like someone handing over a secret he wasn't sure I was ready for. Then he said, "One day, you'll understand. This hammock isn't just for resting." He didn't explain. He never did. But the way he said it, soft, slow, like he was planting something deep in my chest, I never forgot it. That night, as I lay in the hammock alone, I kept hearing his words, looping in the silence, like the creak of old rope, rocking me between sleep and wonder. What did he mean? Was the hammock some kind of door? A bridge? A spell? Or was it just a place where the heart was quiet enough to hear what the world usually hides? It didn't happen all at once. Like most important things, it came quietly. One evening, the hammock swayed in the breeze, but my grandfather didn't come out. I waited, listened to the creak of the rope, watched the sky turn gold, then grey, then dark. The next night, he sat by the window, holding a cup of tea. He didn't drink, his eyes lost in something I couldn't see. I asked him, "Will there be a story tonight?" He smiled gently and said, "Not tonight, little one. Tonight, the story is sleeping." I didn't know what that meant, but I didn't ask again. Gee, the nights that followed were quieter. The hammock still swayed, but not as often. And somehow, without a word, I knew the world inside his stories was beginning to close its eyes. Then one night, he called me, just a whisper from the hallway, soft as the breeze that used to drift through tamarind leaves. I found him already lying in the hammock, his eyes closed, but his smile waiting. I climbed in beside him, like I always did. Our shoulders touched. The night was still. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. And then, without a pause or a warning, he began to speak. He told me of a man who wandered through dreams, collecting forgotten stories and planting them inside hammocks so they'd never be lost. He spoke slowly, as if every word was being carved gently into the air. When he finished, he didn't say the end. He just took my hand, placed something small in it, and said, "This one's for you now." It was a key, tiny, silver, warm from his palm. I opened my mouth to ask, but he shook his head. "Don't use it yet," he whispered. "One day, you'll know where it fits." The next morning, the hammock was empty. I peeked into his room. The blanket rose and fell with his breathing, but he didn't wake. Not that day, or the next. The stories stopped. No more whispers in the hallway. No more gentle hands to push the hammock. Only the quiet hum of the house, trying to remember how to breathe without him. I sat in the hammock alone, swung slowly, listened to the creak, where his voice used to echo. And in my hand, the little silver key, still warm in my memory, still waiting. I didn't know what it opened. A drawer, a box, a door I hadn't seen yet. All I knew was this: he had placed it there, not to unlock something in the house, but something in me. Years passed, the kind that don't make a sound, but still change everything. I grew taller, wider shoulders, quieter thoughts. I left the village. The wooden house faded into the background of busy days and louder places. But in every coat I wore, there was always one thing in the pocket, a tiny silver key. I never used it. I never forgot it. And then, one summer evening, without planning, without reason, I found myself walking the old dirt path again. The house still stood, a little more weathered, a little more quiet, but still breathing. And the hammock, it was there, swaying gently, as if no time had passed at all. Waiting, just waiting. It took a while to find it. Not because it was truly hidden, but because I didn't know what I was looking for. I ran my fingers along the old wooden floor, the bookshelf, the back of the wardrobe. Then behind the curtain, in the corner of the room, where the hammock's shadow used to fall, I saw it. A small box, dusty, worn smooth at the edges, and right in the center, a silver keyhole. I didn't even think. My hand moved on its own. The key, his key, slipped in, as if it had been waiting for this moment, since the day he gave it to me. Click. The lid opened, and inside was a notebook, old, yellowed at the corners, but intact, full. On the first page, written in his careful, looping script, the stories that never made it to my lips. I sat on the floor, sunlight spilling through the curtain, and turned the next page. The pages didn't hold stories like I remembered. No turtles that spoke, no hills that laughed. Instead, there were fragments, like dreams caught mid-sentence. Tonight, I saw her again, the girl with the voice that tames storms. She smiled this time. Sometimes, I wonder if the hammock remembers more than I do. Some stories refuse to be told out loud. They wait for silence, and for someone gentle enough to hear them. Each page felt like a whisper, left behind, not to be explained, but simply to exist. Then I found it, a short letter, written in ink that had almost faded into the paper. If you're reading this, then I'm somewhere in the wind, rocking the stars to sleep. Tell the stories, child, even the broken ones, even the ones that feel unfinished. That's how they stay alive. I held the notebook to my chest, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like him. That evening, I sat in the hammock, same spot, same creak in the rope, but this time, No one was there to push it. I held the notebook in my lap, let the breeze turn the pages, and when it stopped, I looked down, read the first line that met my eyes. Then I opened my mouth and began. It felt strange at first, telling a story, not to someone else, but to the air, to the silence, to the space he used to fill. But the hammock swayed, and the wind didn't interrupt, and before I realized it, I had spoken the whole page aloud. And it didn't feel like a story from the notebook. It felt like mine. That was the moment I understood. He hadn't just told stories to entertain me. He was teaching me how to listen, how to notice the things most people walk past, how to hold a moment in my hands and turn it into something soft for someone else to rest inside. A few days later, I was back in the hammock, reading softly to myself, not really out loud, not really in my head either. And then, a voice, small, curious, full of that light only children carry. "Can I come up?" she asked. I turned. It was my niece, barefoot, a bit muddy, holding a doll with one eye missing. I nodded, and she climbed in, fumbled, giggled, settled in beside me. The hammock creaked again, that familiar, old sound, like a doorway opening, between now and every quiet story ever told. She looked up at me, eyes wide. "Can you tell me a story?" she asked. And in that moment, I swear I felt my grandfather smile, somewhere behind the breeze. I closed the notebook, not because I was done with it, but because the next story was ready to be told, without needing to be read. So I began, not with once upon a time, not with a plan, just with a breath and a feeling that the story already existed, somewhere between us. "There was a bird," I said, "but not the kind you find in trees. This bird lived inside a wind chime." Her eyes lit up. I smiled. It only sang when someone told the truth near it, and if a lie was spoken, it would go completely still. She hugged her doll closer. "What did the bird sound like?" "Like laughter, like the sound of leaves dancing." She nodded, as if she remembered it too. The hammock kept swaying. The sun slipped lower, and just like that, the story went on, from breath to breath, from glance to whisper, carried not by memory, but by trust. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. It was enough that she listened. When the story ended, she didn't clap, didn't ask for more. She just looked up at me, eyes soft, voice small. "Do you think it's real?" I didn't answer right away, because truthfully, I didn't know. The wind chime bird, the hill that moved when people laughed, the girl with the voice that calmed storms, were they real? Maybe not. Maybe yes. But I didn't say that. I just smiled and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, then said, "I don't think the story has to be real, for the feeling it gives you to be true." She blinked, smiled back, and leaned her head on my arm. The hammock swayed, and outside, the world kept rushing on. But in that moment, we weren't in the world. We were in the story. After a while, she fell asleep, still curled up beside me in the hammock, still holding that one-eyed doll, like it was the key to every dream she'd ever had. The sky was fading, that soft purple kind of fading, that makes you forget what day it is. I didn't move, didn't want to break the stillness, didn't want the moment to end. I looked at her small face, so full of trust, and suddenly, I understood something I never had before. We don't tell stories because they're true. We tell them because someone might need them. Not just to fall asleep, not just to pass the time, but to feel less alone, to find a bit of light in a world that sometimes forgets how to be gentle. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there was waiting for the very story you almost didn't tell. A few days later, I opened the notebook again, not to read, just to hold it. But as I flipped through, one page near the end slipped free, like it had been waiting to be found at the right time. It was folded twice, and on the outside, in my grandfather's careful handwriting, were 5 simple words: "When you become the story." My hands shook, just a little, like the air had changed. I unfolded it. Inside was no tale, no fable, just a note. If this page found you, then the hammock chose right. Stories live longest when they find a new voice. I didn't cry, not really, but something inside me leaned forward and listened. As if for the first time, I could hear what silence had been trying to say all along. That night, I didn't bring the notebook with me. I didn't need to. The hammock was already swaying when I stepped outside, as if it had missed me, as if it had been waiting. I lay down, closed my eyes, listened to the silence curl itself around the wooden beams. And then I spoke. No one was beside me. No one asked for a story, but I told one anyway. About a boy who once believed hammocks could fly. About an old man who taught him to listen with more than just ears. And about a little girl who climbed into that same hammock and asked if magic was real. I didn't care if anyone heard me. The point wasn't to be heard. It was to let the story breathe again. And as the stars blinked awake overhead, I knew this wasn't just my grandfather's hammock anymore. It was mine, too. The years went on. Stories came and went. Some whispered, some wept, some too soft to name. I told them all, to children, to friends, to the wind. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they cried, but no matter the tale. The hammock, it didn't ask questions, didn't need applause. It just swayed, like it had all the time in the world. Every time I sat there, I could feel him, not like a ghost, but like a warmth in the wood, a rhythm in the rope. It reminded me that stories don't live in paper or in perfect words. They live in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, in the pause before someone says, "Tell me one more." And the hammock always waited, like it knew that someone, somewhere, would always need just one more story. So here we are, at the end of the story, or maybe just the beginning of another. If you're still awake, thank you for swinging gently with me through memory, through time, through love wrapped in quiet things. I hope you felt it. The hammock, the breeze, the voice that never really left. Grandfather once said, some stories only appear when you stop trying to fall asleep. Maybe this was one of them. And if your eyes are heavy now, if your body is soft and still, then let the story hold you just a little longer. Close your eyes. Breathe. The hammock will keep swaying, even after the words stop. Good night. From me. And from him. Wherever he's rocking now.